right? A lot of people, look, Wehrli is a dude who got a road named after him that I used to live on. That's where this comes from. That's where this whole video came from. Wehrli's the dude, and he had a road named after him that I lived on. My parents lived on him for longer, but I lived on it for a brief time in the early 90s. The road still exists. Wehrli still exists. He's about probably, I don't know how old he is, but I consider him, as do most other people that I know, a G, as in a gangster, like G for gangster. Wehrli The G, in fact, is his name, because he's got a lot of the characteristics that you would admire of a gangster. He was not a gangster, he's never in a gang, but there are characteristics of a gangster that you admire, and Wehrli The G holds those characteristics, but without any of the characteristics that you would disadmire in a gangster, like the violence and criminality and, abusive chaos and whatever other disadmirable traits that a gangster might have. Wehrli The G doesn't have those. But people call non-gangsters gangsters too. Right? That's like a colloquial respect. Call him a G. Or if he was a really super G, you would call him the G, and that's what I call Wehrli The G. All right? And he had a road named after him that I used to live on. And that's the road at the top. It's the top of the mountain. Wehrli's mountain, you would think, right? This is my whole beef. It's not Wehrli's beef, but it's my beef on my own, not even on his behalf. I don't think Wehrli The G even knows who I am. That's fine. But I know who he is. And it's not his mountain, but his road, the road that's named after him. It's not Wehrli G Road. It's not Wehrli The G's road. It's just Wehrli's road. It's at the top of the mountain, but it's not Wehrli's mountain. It should be. It should be, in my opinion. Schooley's Mountain is what the mountain is called. But the top road on that mountain is Wehrli Road, not Schooley Road. Which is just one reason why I think it should be called Wehrli's Mountain and not Schooley's Mountain. But that's a different video I made. But the fact that Wehrli didn't make a beef about it is part of the reason why you consider him the G. He didn't make us think about it. He knows it should be his mountain. Everybody knows it, but the people who named the mountain after Schooley, for some reason, there's not even a Schooley Road. There's a Schooley's Mountain Road that's a different road. It's not at the top though. It's not the most gangster road on the mountain, not even close. Wehrli's is the most gangster mountain. That's another reason why he's a G, because his road is so gangster. Because at night, you gotta be driving that road, you gotta come correct on Wehrli Road, on Wehrli's Road. Because it's so dark up there on that mountain. It's at the very top of the mountain. It winds around the top of the mountain, Wehrli Road does, and it's dark, and you gotta come correct or else you're gonna crash. But yeah, also just Wehrli's just a very chill, appropriate, confident, soft-spoken gangster about his life. Right? That's why he's called Wehrli The G. But it should be called Wehrli G Mountain, or just Wehrli Mountain, or Wehrli's Mountain maybe, but it's called Schooley's Mountain. Whatever. Anyway, that's just part of the Wehrli The G history, I guess you could say, that I know about. Just that part. My main beef is that it should be called Wehrli's Mountain, not Schooley's Mountain. And yeah, not all gangsters are gangsters, right? Like not all gangsters are full on in a gang like a gangster. A capital G gangster, no. Lowercase quotationalized gangster, as in like a cool cat. I don't know where it came from. I didn't invent the term. I didn't invent the sobriquet, or whatever you call it. When you praise somebody with that name, it's a sobriquet, right? Is that what it is? You call somebody a gangster. Maybe in the 40s that used to be like an epithet, like a bad thing, like a disparagement. That dude's a gangster. But now, for some reason, after the 90s and gangster rap, I think, it became colloquialized as a sobriquet, which is the opposite of an epithet. Like, you could have gangster traits, and like people wanted to be considered gangsters, even non-gang members. It's like just like he's cool like a G. You could, you knew those people growing up probably. If you're Gen X or younger, you did. Gangster, non-gangster, right? Not actual gang members, criminal members of a gang, but still cool and confident and swagger and moxie like a gangster, like the best parts of a gangster. You uncapitalize the G, you quotationalize it, and you could call anybody a gangster if they deserve it. You could add that sobriquet, or you just shorten it to the letter G, which you would then capitalize. Again, because a G is not the same exact thing as a gangster. It could stand for it, but it kind of does stand for it, but like, if you call somebody a G, that's like uncapitalized, quotationalized gangster. There's a lot of G's who are non-gang members. And I bet you there's some gang members, in fact, who are gangsters who aren't even G's, who are just kind of jerks, right? But Wehrli, he was a total the G. He was the total G. I should call him Wehrli the total G. I mean, non-gangster though, non-gang member, never in a gang, not ever, not that I know of. He doesn't seem like he rolls like that, but he's confident and swaggerish, but not cocky and obnoxious. No, everybody likes Wehrli the G. Everybody except for the mountain namer people who didn't name it after him. When it's clearly, it's his mountain. He's got the best road on it. I don't know why they didn't call it that. There's no schools around. I think they named Schooley's Mountain after Wehrli D, that rapper from the 90s. And then they just dropped the D. And they just call it Schooley's Mountain. I think he paid for that, free publicity or something. You buy a mountain and you get it named after you. And then everybody thinks of you when they think about that mountain. And Wehrli D was a hip-hop artist, right? So like he could use the publicity. Wehrli's just a regular dude who happens to be the G. I'm not saying Wehrli D's not the G. I don't know about Wehrli D. I don't think I have a problem with Wehrli D. It's not Wehrli D's fault. It's the people who sold the rights to the naming of the mountain to Wehrli D that are at fault here. They should have gone to Wehrli and offered him the chance, or they should have just named it after him. Wehrli's Mountain is what it should be called, but it's not Wehrli D's fault. I don't think Wehrli and Wehrli D even have a beef. I think Wehrli's probably super cool and would rather that he didn't buy that mountain's name. If he didn't know that it should have been Wehrli's Mountain, he wouldn't have been getting all caught up in that mess. But he probably didn't know, because the mountain namer people, when they sold him the rights to the mountain, they probably didn't tell him about Wehrli. That's what I suspect happened. And then he got that other road, Schooley's D's Mountain Road. It used to be called Wehrli D Mountains Road, but they dropped the D. I have a whole other video about it, but they dropped the D out of respect. Wehrli did. He agreed to drop the D because most of the people who live on Schooley's Mountain, Wehrli's Mountain, if you ask me, it's not that they don't like Wehrli D, they're just not into hip hop. They didn't know what the D stood for. Wehrli D just said, look, we'll just drop the D. We'll just call it Wehrli. That's fine. Schooley's Mountain is fine with me. He's not even trying to reach that demographic anyway. So anybody who knows hip hop would know it's probably Wehrli D's Mountain. And anybody who didn't know hip hop wasn't going to probably get into hip hop in the first place, just knows it as Schooley's Mountain. There's no D, there's no controversy, there's no confusion. And that's fine. A bunch of boomers and whatever, that's cool. They're the ones who can afford to live on Wehrli D's Mountain, on Wehrli's Road, All those houses are rich houses up there. I mean, they got richer after my parents left. That's always the way it is. My parents are rich. They do all right. But then it got richer after they left. Up there on the Wehrli Mountain. Wehrli Mountain Road. Wehrli's Road. It's not Wehrli Mountain Road. It should be, but it's not. Anyway, that's what I think that happened. Because I don't know why else they wouldn't call it Wehrli's Mountain. Like I said, there's no schools up there. I think it's named after Schoolie D. Anyhow, that's just some more background story about it. I got a whole video about it. I got a little defense. My first and only short is going to be a defense of Wehrli the G, because people started calling him Wehrli the not G. They don't know. They can't be calling him. He's not a not G. He's definitely, look, you might not think of him as a G, maybe, but he's not a not G. That's a whole different category of things. That's the opposite of a G. He's not the opposite of a G, Wehrli. Or Schoolie either. I don't even know Schoolie. You'd have to know somebody to be able to even call him a not G. You'd have to know them first. And if you knew Wehrli, you would know that he was a G, certainly not a not G. But if you just didn't think, he was all that, you would just call him Wehrli. You wouldn't call him Wehrli the not G. So I got a whole short video calling out those haters who are trying to stir up some crazy, calling him Wehrli the not G. And that's just nonsense. So you can check it out on my shorts. It's the only short that I got. Anyway, that's what that's all about. It's about Wehrli the G and a little bit of his backstory. And a little bit of the backstory of Schoolie D's Mountain. And why I think it should be called Wehrli D's Mountain, or Wehrli the G's Mountain. There's no Wehrli D. I misspoke there. It's easy to get, you can understand how somebody who's talking about Schoolie D and Wehrli the G, you could misspeak and say Wehrli D, but I don't think anybody knows who Wehrli D is. Is there even a Wehrli D? There probably is, but nobody knows who that is. Maybe his mother. Probably his mother, but I bet she didn't name him Wehrli D. I don't know who Wehrli D is, but Wehrli the G, that's what I'm talking about. I used to live on that road. I should know. I lived on there when Schoolie D, it was already Schoolie's Mountain when I lived on it. Right around in the early 90s is when we moved to it. Probably Schoolie D was just getting started then. And Wehrli was already a G at that point. It was already called Wehrli Road. It was also already called Schoolie's Mountain. So I don't know. Maybe Schoolie's dad? I don't know how long it's been called Schoolie's Mountain. Because when did Schoolie D become famous? In the 90s probably, right? That mountain's been named Schoolie's Mountain for a longer time. Maybe Schoolie D's dad, Schoolie D, he named himself after his dad, was Schoolie's dad. And that's where the D came from. Short for dad. That could be Schoolie's dad. Schoolie's Dad Mountain. Maybe that's what it was. Schoolie D's dad bought the rights to the mountain and named it for his son Schoolie D. Before Schoolie D was famous. That probably was it, sometime in the 80s maybe, or the 70s even. Schoolie D's dad knew, he just knew. He had high hopes for his son, and he knew he was going to be successful. He didn't know in what. But maybe he nicknamed him Schoolie D when Schoolie D was a boy. That was his young nickname, and his dad nicknamed him that. Before he became, it wasn't his hip-hop name. He was already Schoolie D even before he started rapping. And so Schoolie D's dad, Mr. Schoolie, bought the rights for what should have been Wehrli the G's Mountain. I don't know what it used to be called. Just a mountain. Small, it's not even really. It's like a hill. But, it's what we got out here in New Jersey. Not a lot of mountains, really. Not large elevations. But, sometime in the 70s, I think Mr. Schooley bought the rights to that mountain and named it after his son's nickname, Schoolie D. Schoolie D Mountain and Schoolie D Mountains Road. And then later, before the 90s, they negotiated out the D part of it. Because it was confusing to boomers and the older people who aren't really, they didn't know what the D stood for. It sounded maybe a little too gangster, a little too hip-hop for everybody who could afford houses up on, Wehrli Road on the top of the mountain. They didn't want to be called Schoolie D's Mountain, just Schoolie Mountain, please. And Schoolie and his dad were both very cool about it. They said, sure, I get it. We get it. But my whole thing is not against the Schoolie family. It's against the people who sold the rights of the mountain to the Schoolie family. They had no right to do that. It should have been Wehrli's Mountain. Anyway, the whole thing just points to the evidence that the Wehrli, he never took a contest to the whole thing. He was a G the whole way through about it. Never once threw a tantrum, never once threw any shade at Schoolie D or his father. As far as Wehrli The G's concerned, hey, just naming that top road after him was good enough. He's content. That's part of his genus, right? He doesn't get bent out of shape over nonsense. Even less so than I am. I'm being a little bent out of shape, I guess. It's just, look, I just wanted to express my appreciation for Wehrli The G. And then some people started throwing down Wehrli The G. And that got my hackles up, right, if you will. I don't know what hackles are, but, it got me bent out of shape a little bit. So I defended him, and now I can't stop talking about him. This is like my 4th video about Wehrli The G already, in like a day. So, enough of that. It's just further backstory and more evidence that I wanted to provide. Context. Evidentiary context. Contextual evidence of his genus, of his gangster, non-gangster gangster. Right? That's all. All right. Good enough.